The next section is, having covered the virus, the next section is money shortage news. And there have been 2 reports in the UK this past week of the police calling out and arresting criminals in the past month. One is a 700 plus arrest of top figures in organised crime involving drugs and prostitution, and the second is the police calling out banks for systematic crime against customers. And the police commissioner accused the UK's major high street banks of perpetrating serious organised crime against their customers, potentially causing billions of pounds of losses over at least a decade by forging signatures to win court cases and repossessing homes. Now, some people will say, that's great news, and in essence it is. But I'm asking people to exercise caution, because drugs is big money, and the clowns near the top of the money tree need far more money than we do. Like what happened with the drug runners in South and Central America, the trade was moved into America, in some states, and the CIA continued to run it without the extra cost of middlemen, gangsters, and other overheads. And as for the bank issue, remember the Clowns in Panic show. We told you they were wanting to get rid of banks. Central banks in particular, plus other high street banks, in favour of, quote, decentralising, unquote. Because they have the desire for us all to become the bank via our phones and then microchips. And so whilst it's good that the police are calling these people out, but like the drug issue, it appears to me to be a reduction of costs and overheads. Wirecard collapsed on Thursday, owing creditors almost $4 billion after disclosing a gaping hole in its books that its auditor, EY, said was the result of a sophisticated global fraud. Funny these are all coming to light. You'll connect the dots. And the payments company filed for insolvency at a Munich court, saying that with 1.3 billion euros, which is about $1.5 billion of loans due within a week, its survival as a going concern was not assured. Now, Wirecard's implosion came just 7 days after EY, its auditors for more than a decade, refused to sign off on the 2019 accounts, forcing out the chief executive Markus Braun and leading it to admit that $2.1 billion of its cash probably didn't exist. Oh my. Bit like the Federal Reserve, and we're going to add 500 billion and 1.1 trillion. Doesn't exist. And they said that there are clear indications that this was an elaborate and sophisticated fraud involving multiple parties around the world. And he also went on and said that creditors predictably have scant hope of getting back the €3.5 billion that they are owed, and sources familiar with the matter said of that total, Wirecard had borrowed $1.75 billion from 15 banks and issued $500 million in bonds, which are now junk, despite the Federal Reserve trying to release more of them. It's junk. No one's buying them. They said the money's gone, and he said we may recoup a few euros in a couple of years, but we'll write off the loan now. Now, Coatue Management and 9 other hedge funds likely earned more than €1.5 billion this week, having placed bets against Wirecard. So they knew this is a systematic fraud where they're just harvesting off other companies. And again, it proves the clowns in panic, where they're siphoning off and shutting down the lower end businesses. This is probably the first, and it won't be the last. So they made Coatue Management and 9 other hedge funds made $1.5 billion on bets against Wirecard, and it collapsing. Now Wirecard shares crashed to €2.5 from 104.5 the previous week on Thursday, before the company revealed a $2.1 billion hole in its accounts. And that has landed Coatue Management, the hedge fund with the largest short position, a $271 million or million euro profit on deliberately knocking out a competitor. And this is what they're doing. Now, shorting a stock involves borrowing it from an institutional investor such as a pension fund. Go figure. Where have we heard that recently? Selling it and then buying it back to return to the investor when the shares have fallen, and then pocketing the profit. That's how part of the stimulus check was paid. Altogether, the 10 hedge funds have made hundreds of millions between the company announcing its mammoth accounting hole on June the 18th and Thursday of last week, when it applied for insolvency. And the shares crashed 97% in the 1 week. Now, London-based TCI had made a profit of €173.6 million, while Marshall Wace and Greenvale made $146 million and $110 million respectively. But this, like other alleged hackings that we've covered in recent shows, is out and out money stealing and laundering by the clowns. And here's another example of that statement, and this is about the 6th stolen or hacked report that we've had in the show since April, proving yet again their lack of funds. A leading medical research institution working on a cure for COVID-19 has admitted it paid hackers $1.14 million ransom after a covert negotiation was witnessed by the BBC News. The Netwalker criminal gang attacked the University of California, San Francisco on June the 1st, and IT staff unplugged computers in a race to stop the malware spreading. But after an anonymous tip-off enabled BBC News to follow the ransom negotiations on a live chat on the dark web. Why is BBC News on the dark web, and which rogue elements are giving them this information? Or are they involved in it? So cybersecurity experts say these sorts of negotiations are now happening all over the world. Interesting. Sometimes for even larger sums against the advice of law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, Europol and the UK's National Cyber Security Centre. Now, Networker alone has been linked to at least 2 other ransomware attacks on universities in the past 2 months. And at first glance, its dark web homepage looks like a standard customer service website with a frequently asked questions tab, an offer of a free sample of its software, and a live chat option. But there's also a countdown timer ticking to a time when the hackers either double the price of their ransom or delete the data they have scrambled with malware. So what was happening is that you were instructed to log in either by email or a ransom note left on a hacked computer screen, and UCSF was met with the following message on June the 5th. 6 hours later, the university asked for more time, and the details of the hack to be removed from the NetWalkers public blog. But they noted that the University of California, San Francisco made billions a year, and so then the hackers demanded $3 million. So a university that makes billions a year. Does that sound right to you? But the US UCSF representative who may have been an external specialist negotiator explained the coronavirus pandemic had been financially devastating for the university and begged them to accept $780,000. But after a day of back and forth negotiations, UCSF said it had pulled together all available money and would pay $1.02 million, but the criminals refused to go below $1.5 million. Hours later, the university came back with details of how it procured more money and a final offer of $1.140 million. And the next day, 116.4 bitcoins were then transferred to NetWalkers' electronic wallets and the decryption software sent to UCSF. Now, according to UCSF, is now assisting the FBI with its investigations while working to restore all affected systems. And it told BBC the data was encrypted is important to some of the academic work we pursue as a university serving the public good. Therefore, we made the difficult decision to pay some portion of the ransom, approximately $1.14 million, to the individuals behind the malware attack in exchange for a tool to unlock the encrypted data, which was created by Langley and the NSA, and a return of the data obtained. Does that story sound valid to you? No, it doesn't to me either. Same clowns, just harvesting money off everything and everyone. And then we get this story. Same thing, same bollocks. The federal government sent $1.4 billion in coronavirus stimulus money to nearly 1.1 million dead people. Really? According to Congress Independent Watchdog Agency, and the finding was part of a report from the Government Accountability Office examining the federal government's coronavirus relief spending in March and April, and it comes as lawmakers weigh another round of stimulus funding while the economy struggles to recover from the coronavirus-induced recession. They haven't paid the last round yet. They haven't even paid 50% of it, despite stealing funds from the Social Security and the pension fund. You're telling me that the database is not up to date, that you're going to send checks to 1.1 million dead people. Now, the watchdog agency said that the payments to dead people came during the first 3 rounds of stimulus checks. In other words, they wouldn't get cashed. Look, we sent all these checks out, and 1.1 million was to dead people. Did you think we're all stupid? Now, the CARES Act directed stimulus checks of up to $1,200 to be sent to individuals who filed taxes in the last 2 years and made less than $99,000 a year, and families were eligible for more money. And the GOA found that the Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service did not use government debt records to exclude deceased individuals from receiving a stimulus check, in part because of a legal interpretation the agencies were operating under. Do you believe that? The Treasury, hello Munchkin, IRS run by the Rothschilds. pulling the wool over our eyes with this BS. While the IRS has access to death records kept by the Social Security Administration, the Treasury and the Bureau of Fiscal Service, which actually sent out the checks, apparently does not have any records. The country's being run by complete retards and jackasses. But the IRS in May said on its website that payments to dead people must be returned to the government, but it does not have a plan to recoup the funds. I would take it out of all their staff's pay personally and fire them all for gross incompetence, and the Treasury. So that's some of the evidence, and here's more of the evidence. Two more before we go into a summing up and a music break. Al Gore, UN Secretary General, and others are now demanding a, quote, great reset of global capitalism. That was on June the 25th. And they said these are truly dangerous times for those who support individual liberty and free markets. Yeah, right. And at a meeting hosted by the highly influential World Economic Forum, powerful officials from non-profits, government, business, academia, labour unions and activist groups announced their plan for a great reset of global capitalism. And it is a proposal they acknowledge has only been made possible because of the opportunity provided by the economic destruction caused by the coronavirus. Problem, reaction, solution again, you see. Now, supporters and attendees of the meeting included helicopter head, Prince Charles, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, AJ Banga, CEO of MasterCard, Bernard Looney, does he play tunes? The CEO of BP, and Gina Gopinath, the chief economist at the International Monetary Fund. All the same clowns, IMF, really. And the purpose, they say, of the Great Reset isn't merely to enact policies that will lead to additional wealth redistribution, but rather to completely overhaul the world's existing structures and institutions. And in an article published on the World Economic Forum website, Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of WEF, wrote of the Great Reset and said every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism to enact policies that would lead to wealth redistribution. Oh dear, Mr. Gore. Suddenly it's called wealth redistribution, as you at the lower end of the financial scale are now being harvested by the top end. But it's funny they were not complaining of that whilst he and others was looting the world with his fake climate change program, which only benefits vampires like him and the UN. And what we're seeing here is a split in the faction wars. We warned many of the lower, who thought they were the upper elites, would get pushed out in this next phase of the struggle for control. And now they're panicking. But we, the people, have to build an alternative, and the TPC is the vehicle to do so. We all don't like the way this world is being run, but we cannot sit back waiting for Q or Trump to do something. That is our responsibility, not theirs. And then we got this story this week. There is a new launch by clowns trying to circumvent the new system and their desperate lack of funds, and so they launched their latest money scam called the Q Initiative. Now, I found no evidence directly linking it to Q and Trump, but it would certainly confuse many trying to part with their funds, thinking it was related. It's just another crypto-based scam that followed the RV, dinar, Sims and Dongs currencies being traded in for stable currencies on the promise those devalued currencies would rise exponentially. It's the same promise, it's the same program, and the same scam. Just collecting your dollars, your pounds and euros for fresh air tokens to keep them running a little bit longer. That's all. But then in their manifesto of this Q Initiative, it confirmed what our show has been saying for a while, that the money pot is dwindling. Listen closely to this next sentence. They stated the world's total economic activity is around 100 trillion US dollars. Now recently, last 2 years or even year, it was $123 trillion. GDP, global GDP. Well, perhaps the DOD misplaced another $23 trillion. Who knows? But here is the key line in their words. The total amount of money in the world is between 40 and 90 trillion, depending on the definition of what is money. So we've gone from a global GDP of 123 trillion down to 100 trillion, but they've only got 40 to 90 trillion in the pot. So there's not enough to go around. And this is why they were forced into drastic measures of halting the economy and closing down hundreds of thousands of businesses, along with the hacking we've just reported, and sending checks out to dead people. Like that rarely happens. Or fake hacking in universities to acquire 1.14 million. Or the unemployment fraud scam with was it Washington State that was in the last show? They're collecting funds because the pot is dwindling. So in the past month, we're now seeing Black Lives Matter, now the Q Initiative, which will be followed by another inevitable false flag or major donation type event. And it's all about harvesting everything of what is left from the people. So why are these new hacking and money savings events like police defunding, etc. happening? Well, it proves what we said all along. The money pot is dwindling. And their means of cheating, stealing and laundering has been stifled so much now, they have no other options except the trust. But they don't want the trust. And it appears that will not be released anytime soon, given the trustee was asking for t-shirt and hat donations in a recent broadcast. Although my personal opinion is that it's been set back due to the ongoing split and will not be fruitful until corrected. Time will tell. But they don't want the trust out because their power and control game will be ended with the first dollar out. We know it and they know it. So what they're doing is they're fighting on with a smaller pool of money, hoping for some divine intervention, their gods to come back and save them, or the trustee to quit, of which they've made several attempts against her to do that. All to date have failed. So they are left with a massive problem, because the old system costs tens of billions of dollars per day just to run it. And so now they're in a cost-cutting mode, as we had warned. Banks, police, government, agencies and military are all under threat of severe cuts. Because if money supply is anywhere near the 40 trillion, that means there is only a third of the money available, and so only a third of the programs is going to be run, and only a third of the jobs can be funded. All of which this show has repeatedly warned of, and the trustee told all the so-called higher echelons would unfold since 2016 onwards, including Mr. Trump. The old system is too costly, and now they have to clear up their own mess and reduce costs, all to keep themselves in a game that they've already lost. Oops. Some people like to focus on the negative aspect. Some accuse our show of being negative. But that is a massive victory, largely achieved by the work of this show and also the trustee.